Husband gave permission to open our marriage, then disappeared once I did, leaving me with nothing. Isabella and Marc had been the quintessential high school sweethearts, their love story a tapestry of shared dreams and promises. As they moved through the phases of life together, from the giddy days of youth to the settled routines of married life, the vibrancy that once defined them seemed to dim. They found themselves ensnared in the monotonous rhythm of daily life, their conversations dwindling to mundane exchanges about groceries and bills. One rainy evening, as they sat in their modest living room, the sound of raindrops pattering against the windowpane, Marc broached a subject that caught Isabella off guard. He suggested they consider opening their marriage. The idea, so radical and unexpected, sent a jolt through Isabella. She gazed at Marc, trying to decipher if the man she knew so well was earnest or if this was some ill-conceived joke. Marc's eyes, however, held a seriousness that Isabella had seldom seen. He spoke of feeling trapped, not by their marriage, but by the unyielding nature of monogamy. He talked about exploration, about rediscovering themselves, not just as a couple, but as individuals. It wasn't about finding something lacking in each other, he insisted, but about experiencing life in a broader spectrum. Isabella felt a whirlwind of emotions. There was fear, a tremulous sense of insecurity at the thought of venturing into such unknown territory. There was also a flicker of curiosity, an unacknowledged yearning for something different, something that broke the chains of their current existence. But overriding it all was a deep-seated worry about what this would mean for their future. Could their marriage withstand such a radical change? Was this an escape route for Marc, a way to drift away from her? Over the next few days, Isabella wrestled with her thoughts. She observed Marc, trying to understand his mindset. He seemed more animated than he had in months, talking enthusiastically about the possibilities that lay ahead. Isabella couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and apprehension at his willingness to embrace such a daring concept. After much contemplation and numerous conversations fraught with vulnerability and honesty, Isabella consented. She agreed to the idea of an open marriage, not entirely convinced but propelled by a combination of trust in Marc and a secret desire for a change in her own life. She rationalized that perhaps this was the jolt their relationship needed, a way to reignite the passion that once defined them. The decision was made with a mix of trepidation and excitement. They set ground rules, talked about boundaries, and emphasized the need for absolute transparency. It was a pact sealed with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, a leap into a realm that was as thrilling as it was frightening. As they embarked on this unconventional journey, Isabella couldn't shake off a nagging feeling at the back of her mind. She wondered if this was the key to rekindling their love or the beginning of a path that would lead them in entirely different directions. Unbeknownst to her, this decision would unravel their lives in ways she could never have imagined. The decision to open their marriage marked the beginning of a journey neither Isabella nor Marc could have fully anticipated. Isabella, once apprehensive, found herself gradually embracing this newfound freedom. It was like stepping into a world that was at once exhilarating and daunting. Her first foray into this open arrangement was cautious, filled with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. She created an online profile on a dating site for people in open relationships, her fingers hesitating as she typed out a description of herself and what she was looking for. It felt surreal, this act of seeking connection outside her marriage, but it also sparked a sense of adventure that she hadn't felt in years. As messages began to trickle in, Isabella experienced a rush of excitement. There were compliments, flirty exchanges, and invitations to meet. She was surprised at how much attention she received and how it made her feel desirable in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about physical attraction, it was the thrill of being seen and appreciated as an individual, not just as Marc's wife. Meanwhile, Marc also delved into his own explorations. He seemed more at ease with the arrangement, perhaps having contemplated it longer. Yet, as he went on dates, he remained somewhat distant about his experiences, sharing only the surface details with Isabella. He encouraged her to enjoy her journey but was less forthcoming about his own, creating an unspoken barrier between them. Isabella's first actual date was with a man named Alex, who was also in an open marriage. They met at a cozy cafe, and the initial awkwardness soon gave way to a comfortable conversation. Alex was a good listener, and Isabella found herself opening up about her life, her marriage, and her hopes for this new phase. The date ended with a friendly hug and a promise to keep in touch. As weeks turned into months, Isabella found herself more immersed in this lifestyle. She met a few more people, some leading to brief romances, others just remaining as pleasant acquaintances. Each encounter taught her something new about herself, her desires, and her boundaries. Isabella noticed changes in herself. She felt more confident, more vibrant. She also realized that she was learning to compartmentalize her life, her time with Marc and her time exploring other relationships. This duality was confusing yet intriguing. Marc and Isabella's relationship, meanwhile, began to shift in subtle ways. They still shared a home and a life, but their conversations often skirted around the depth of their individual experiences outside the marriage. There was an unspoken understanding, a respect for each other's privacy, yet it also created a distance that hadn't been there before. One evening, as Isabella returned home from a date, she found Marc sitting in the living room, lost in thought. She sensed a certain pensiveness in his demeanor, a contrast to his usual easygoing nature. When she asked if everything was all right, he simply smiled and assured her it was. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and Isabella felt a pang of concern. As they went to bed that night, Isabella lay awake, pondering the complexities of their relationship. She wondered if this path they had chosen was bringing them closer or leading them down a road of quiet estrangement. The excitement of new experiences was undeniable, but the shifting dynamics of her marriage to Marc left her with a growing sense of unease. As the autumn leaves began to turn, Isabella's life, too, underwent a transformation that was both unexpected and bewildering. Marc, who had once been her constant, her anchor, began to drift away in a manner that was both subtle and alarming. His absences, once just for an evening or a weekend, stretched longer, his explanations more vague and his return less certain. Isabella's unease grew as days turned into weeks, with Marc becoming increasingly distant. Then, one ordinary Wednesday, Marc left for a supposed business trip, a suitcase in hand and a peck on her cheek. However, as the hours turned into days and then weeks, with no word from him, a sinking realization dawned on Isabella: Marc was not coming back. Panic set in as she tried to reach him, her calls unanswered, her messages floating in the digital void. His social media profiles were deactivated, and his colleagues mentioned he had taken an indefinite leave. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if Marc had vanished into thin air. The true extent of Marc's disappearance became painfully clear when Isabella received a call from the bank. The joint accounts were emptied, investments liquidated, and the mortgage had gone unpaid for months. Marc had meticulously planned his exit, leaving a trail of financial ruin in his wake. Isabella was aghast. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word to describe the chasm that had opened up in her life. The man she had loved and trusted, the partner she had agreed to explore the boundaries of marriage with, had left her with nothing. The open marriage, it seemed, was a diversion, a ploy to distract while he orchestrated his escape. The house, once a symbol of their life together, now felt like a hollow shell. Isabella wandered through the rooms, each corner a reminder of the life she thought she had. The photographs on the walls mocked her with happier times, the empty closet echoed with a silence that was deafening. With limited options, Isabella sought legal counsel, only to be told that recovering her losses would be difficult. Marc had covered his tracks well, and without knowing his whereabouts, legal action was a distant possibility. Isabella's emotions oscillated between anger, grief, and disbelief. How could the man she had shared her life with, the man she had embarked on this open marriage journey with, just disappear? Was this his plan all along? Had she been just a pawn in his game? The community she had built in her open relationship experiences became a source of unexpected support. Friends, old and new, rallied around her, offering emotional support and practical help. But even in the midst of this kindness, Isabella felt a profound loneliness. The betrayal had left a void that was hard to fill. As she lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, Isabella realized that this was more than just the end of her marriage. It was the shattering of trust, the realization that the person she thought she knew was a stranger. The open marriage, which had started as a journey of exploration, had ended in a labyrinth of deceit. Isabella knew she had to rebuild her life, but the path forward was murky. The future, once filled with possibilities, now seemed daunting. As she grappled with the remnants of her broken life, she knew one thing for certain: the journey ahead would be hers alone. The stark reality of Marc's betrayal and the resulting financial ruin hit Isabella like a relentless storm. The once warm and inviting home they shared now felt like a prison of memories and lost dreams. She spent her days sifting through paperwork, trying to make sense of their finances, only to find more debts and deception. Isabella felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of her situation. Not only was she grappling with the emotional turmoil of abandonment, but she also faced the daunting task of financial survival. The house, once a symbol of their shared life, now loomed over her as a burden too heavy to bear. The threat of foreclosure was real, and with limited savings, Isabella knew she had to act fast. She began to sell off whatever she could: furniture, electronics, even some of her cherished belongings. Each item sold felt like a piece of her old life slipping away, but necessity overruled sentimentality. She started looking for jobs, ready to take up any work that would help her keep afloat. Her days were filled with job applications, interviews, and the relentless pursuit of stability. As she delved into this new reality, Isabella's emotions were a whirlwind. Anger at Marc for his deceit was predominant, but there were also moments of self-doubt and guilt. Had she been too naive? Did she ignore the warning signs? The questions haunted her, but she knew dwelling on them wouldn't change her situation. The support from her friends, particularly those she met during her open relationship experiences, was a lifeline. They offered not just sympathy, but practical help, from assisting with job searches to providing legal advice. Isabella realized that her journey in the open marriage had given her more than just experiences; it had given her a community. Isabella's relationship with her own identity evolved as well. The experience of being independent in her romantic life had initially been liberating, but now it took on a new meaning. It was no longer just about exploring her desires; it was about survival, resilience, and the strength to rebuild her life from scratch. As the days turned into weeks, Isabella started to see small victories. She secured a part-time job at a local bookstore, a place that offered not just income, but a refuge from her troubles. The job was a far cry from the comfortable life she once knew, but it brought a sense of accomplishment and normalcy. In the quiet moments of the night, Isabella often reflected on her marriage with Marc. She thought about the love they shared, the dreams they built, and how it all came crashing down. The journey they embarked on together, which was supposed to bring them closer, had instead torn them apart. But amid the chaos, Isabella found moments of clarity and empowerment. She was learning to rely on herself, to make decisions that were best for her. The vulnerability of her situation was frightening, but it also brought a sense of liberation. She was no longer bound by Marc's choices, her path was her own to carve. Isabella stands at the crossroads of her life. The future is uncertain, the path ahead filled with challenges, but there is a spark of hope. Amidst the ruins of her old life, she begins to lay the foundation for a new beginning, one that is defined by her strength, resilience, and the courage to move forward. Months had passed since Marc's departure, and the initial shock and despair had gradually given way to a determined resolve within Isabella. She had faced her darkest moments, confronted her fears, and now stood ready to forge a new path. Isabella's life had taken on a rhythm of its own, a blend of work, self-care, and rebuilding connections. The job at the bookstore, which had started as a mere means to an end, had become a source of joy and fulfillment. Surrounded by books, she found wisdom and escape, and in the regular customers, a sense of community. Financial stability was still a distant goal, but Isabella had managed to stave off the immediate crises. She learned to live within her means, finding simplicity and contentment in things she once overlooked. The small apartment she had moved into was sparse but suffused with a sense of peace and autonomy. Emotionally, the journey was more complex. Isabella had days when the weight of loneliness and betrayal felt crushing. Yet, there were also moments of profound self-discovery. She realized that her identity was not anchored to her relationship with Marc, but was a tapestry of her experiences, beliefs, and dreams. She began to appreciate her own resilience, the strength that carried her through the storm. The open relationship experiences, once a source of trepidation, now offered valuable lessons. Isabella understood the importance of boundaries, communication, and most importantly, self-respect. These encounters had shown her the spectrum of human connections, and she emerged wiser, more discerning in her relationships. Isabella also reconnected with old friends, mending bridges that had weakened during her marriage. These rekindled friendships brought a sense of belonging and support, reminding her that she was not alone in her journey. One significant change was her approach to love and relationships. The idea of romance had transformed for Isabella. She no longer sought validation or completion from others. Instead, she sought connections that were enriching, respectful, and honest. She learned to enjoy her own company, finding joy in solitude as much as in companionship. In her moments of reflection, Isabella often thought of Marc. The anger and betrayal had faded into a dull ache, a chapter of her life that was closed but not forgotten. She wondered about his fate, but these thoughts no longer consumed her. Marc had been a part of her story, but he was not the entirety of it. As the chapter draws to a close, we find Isabella in a moment of quiet contemplation. She stands at her apartment window, gazing out at the city that had witnessed her lowest and her rising. The journey had been arduous, filled with unexpected turns, but it had led her to a place of self-acceptance and hope. The story of Isabella is not one of a fairy tale ending but of real-life resilience. It is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the ability to rise from the ashes of despair and rebuild a life marked by dignity and grace. As she turns from the window, a subtle smile graces her lips, a symbol of her newfound peace and optimism for the future. Her story, a blend of pain, growth, and triumph, is a reminder that even in our darkest times, there is always a path forward, illuminated by the light of our inner strength.